Thank you, everyone. My name is Andrei Robachevsky. I work for Internet Society. Excuse me. And today here I'm talking about work in progress that could be a next chapter in the community project called MANRS. Well, before I start, I probably need to set the context and explain a little bit what MANRS is. And I wonder how many people in the room know or heard about MANRS, about this initiative. Quite a few, so that simplifies my work. Basically what MANRS is, it's a baseline. It's a baseline that we try to promote to be a new norm in routing operations, which consists of 4 ISPs, for instance, 4 simple actions that ISPs that join this effort are required to implement. And it's also community, because any effort that you try to sort of progress, especially in the norm space, is as strong as the community that supports that. So that's basically MANRS in a nutshell. But you can go to the website and learn more about the actions and what is required to join this. But just to stress, this is not a declarational statement, and this is not a code of conduct. That's really an actionable thing that network operators are required to demonstrate the implementation before they can join. So those are the 4 actions that were developed 5 years ago when these initiatives started. And Internet Society role here is a secretariat, but really that's an industry initiative. Network operators started this, and network operators continue to run this initiative. 4 major actions, very tight in scope. They basically say clean up your side of the street. They are not best current practices. They're minimum current practices that are distilled from best current practices. But that's sort of the bar, not too low and not too high at the same time, that can potential to become norm. But once we launched this initiative, soon after we realized that other entities that can also very much contribute to improving routing security. One of them is Internet exchange points. They have local communities with common operation objective, right? They have potential to actually introduce some higher hygiene in the environment they operate, which resulted in the work which we call the MANRS IXP Programme. And first we thought, well, why don't IXP just join MANRS and comply to those 4 action points that I demonstrated before. But soon discussing this, we realized that no, they have specific needs and they have specific ways to be more effective when it talks about routing security. And in particular, IXPs that running route server can enforce a high level of routing hygiene, not allowing incorrect routing announcement propagating through this proxy, right, for instance. And they also have high potential to promote MANRS and high norms of routing hygiene among their membership. So those 2 actions, they are mandatory when an internet exchange point wants to join this initiative, and they are looking after that. So as time goes by, excuse me, yeah. As time went by, we thought, well, that's great. We have ISPs, we have IXPs. There are also significant entities operating on the internet that are called CDN providers or cloud providers. And we were thinking, are they just networks? Are they just maybe networks? Or are they something bigger, and the impact on routing can be bigger as well? And one of the ideas was, probably they're bigger, probably they're slightly different, and probably they have different requirements and ways to contribute to routing security. One of the things is they have enormous peering power. And if we can leverage this peering power, because people want to peer with CDNs, people want to peer with cloud providers, maybe we can leverage this to improve routing security as well. So we got together and we used the approach that we used in initial MANRS and then in the IXP program. Raise this idea, and if it passes the love test, go further, set up a group of volunteers, a task force, develop a set of useful requirements, what we call actions, and then solicit feedback from a wider community. That's where we are now. I'm here to solicit this feedback. Then finalize the action set and launch. And by launch we mean not just declare this on the website, but have a group of CDN and cloud providers that implement those actions and can demonstrate that that can be done. So what are those actions? And this is, again, work in progress. We are soliciting feedback on that. We came up with 6 actions, which is subject to change, of course. It's not final. And the first one is probably one of the most important ones. If you're a CDN or cloud provider, you enforce filtering, whitelist filtering, for your non-transit peers. Meaning, if you want to peer with a cloud provider or CDN, you better register your routes, for instance, in RPKI or IRR, and filters will be built that will not allow any other announcements coming from you. Well, the same action is very similar to ISP action, which says do not or prevent any spoofed any traffic with spoofed source IP addresses leaving your network, which probably not a big problem for CDNs that have very much control over their infrastructure. For cloud providers, it might be more challenging, but that's again the purpose of having this action in place. Coordination, coordinate, and communication, that's basically what it talks about, having your contact information open, being able to be contacted and be responsive. Action 4, again, very similar to what ISPs are doing, and that's called facilitate validation of routing information on global scale. The thing is, as you know, that task strongly depends on the quality of data of routing repositories, be it Internet Routing Registry or an RPKI system. If this data is incomplete, that's how far you can go with global validation, right? And you probably remember that when RPKI took off, there were some problems with quality of that data as well, and people were reluctant to use that. But now people are quite comfortable, for instance, using RPKI to drop invalid routes. So if RPKI invalidates some of the announcements, people trust this data well enough to drop that. So this quality is raising, and that's essential in enabling validation on the global scale. Of course, action 5, that's one of the purpose of the exercise, is that you encourage MANRS adoption. And cloud and CDN providers have a lot of peers. They have their own network of those connections. And if they use this to encourage their peers to implement MANRS, that would be great. And in fact, this is a win-win situation, because if you only protect your border with non-transit peers, bad announcements will get to you anyway, for instance, through your transit provider. So if your peers actually implement MANRS, that guarantees that those announcements will not leave, they will not pollute the routing system with those announcements, and you will not receive them. And action 4, which is not mandatory, and again we have some discussion whether it's useful or not, is to provide some monitoring debugging tools to peering partners. For instance, if you implement this whitelist filtering, and that's what we also experience with internet exchange points, one thing is that you drop something on the floor. Another thing that might be also very helpful, if you provide some mechanism to your peers to be aware that some of the announcements that they generated are actually dropped. So this is action 4. Now, this is the task force, the people that contributed to this action set, and we had some discussions and calls and meetings. So I'm very grateful for them to participate in this work. This is the set where you can look at the full description, not in this brief lightning talk, but full description of those action set. And if you're a CDN or cloud provider, your feedback is enormously important. If you're a network operator, it's also very important, because you're dealing with these entities, to see how effective those actions could be. We set up a small survey. So this is a QR code, and this is URL for this survey. It basically just to get some room temperature on what you feel about those actions. Are they useful? Are they not? Do you agree with the wording, or you would prefer another one? That feedback would be very helpful in moving this project further towards the launch. So please take your time. It's a very simple survey, multiple choice. And I think with that ends my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions if there are. All right, well, thank you very much.